start recording. Let's move back to the, let's see, I think it should be this one. Yes, to the notebook we have. So, as we mentioned before, HTML file is basically how your browser reads this website. It's a bunch of text that's separated by different separator. It's not meant to be read by a human, but sometimes we still need to kind of know like approximately what is it corresponding to. So here is a quick like breakdown of the key thing. A tag, it could be like basically the type of the like element. It could mean something like it's a title. It could mean something like it's a like paragraph. It could be a style element or something. And an attribute like this one is, I think I should give it some example later. But basically, an HTML, well, let's just go down to this part faster. So each time, I want to point out, I think this is not included here. Each time whenever you get an HTML, you will get a response. And let's see. And from this response, the most important part of that is the content. Sometimes your HTML response will tell you, hold on, there's something wrong with the content or with the request. So you're not getting the right thing. We'll see an example of that later. But basically, as we can see, HTML is broken down into like title, paragraph, H1, H2, image, and all sorts of things. It's basically telling your computer how to parse an entire text, like that's more like usually on the scale of a couple thousand lines to a couple hundreds of thousand lines per document per HTML file into a website that you can interact with. And of course, this is not exhaustive. There are like tens, hundreds, thousands of different HTML elements out there. And when we're doing web scraping, what we're doing is basically, okay, identify this is the elements we want somewhere, and we want to extract this pattern from the website. And some of you may remember, hold on, I remember kind of this type of thing from regex. And yes, that's one of the reasons we introduced regex in the first place, because regex is kind of one of the most common tools you use in web scraping. One of the common things you do in web scraping is, okay, I got this HTML document. I need to extract some of the important part of that from it. And then we'll use regex to do it. So let's do a quick run through of what exactly does HTML do right now. So remember last week we were using Airbnb, a data set scraped from Airbnb, like containing the price, containing the listing, and so on and so forth. This, I think I mentioned last week, like that data set was actually scraped from the internet. And this week we're going to we're not going to like fully replicate that. It's a little bit too complicated for this, like for Python 100. You might be able to do it once you go into Python 200. But we could still think about how the author built the data set from scratch. And I would say it's once you get to the idea of how the author actually scraped that, it's not super complicated to go from here to that data set if you have the right server or computing architecture set up. I'll mention why is that a point later. So let's move on to this website. Okay, I think I already have it open. So it's here. And for those of you who joined a little bit late, I'm going to show it again. So you can see, okay, here I'm using Google Chrome. I'm not sure which browser are you guys using. If you guys are using a different browser, maybe you have to search how to use that exactly. So How many of you are using Google Chrome here? Or just type the browser you're using in the chat. Because this operation requires, well, different browser have different like operations for this. I could try Safari, but I don't only have Safari and Google Chrome on my computer. Okay, some of you are using Google Chrome. Okay, so let's see. So this is normally how you would see this page when you click the link. Completely normal, you can interact with that. Now the question is, how can I, okay, if I want to tell my computer to scrape the price from this, how can I find, as we said, when we're opening Python or whatever, it only get the HTML text. How can we know which part of the HTML text we need from here? Well, one of the tools is to go to developer tool here. If you go to view, you can go to developer and click inspect element. And here you can kind of go around and your browser will tell you, okay, this element, this component, what you're seeing, your cursor is floating around, corresponds to this part of the HTML text. For example, my price is corresponding to this text here, span class. And unfortunately, Airbnb, for some of the better website, the nicer website, not better, the nicer website, the class is something that's fixed. But Airbnb does not like the idea of web scraping. So they're using what we call a dynamic class, which means that each time you open this page, this class element is kind of randomized by their logic. There is a good reason why they do it, because they don't want people to do too much web scraping. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, here, this element corresponds to the HTML text we want for the price. And we can see, okay, there is a $285. That's exactly the information we want. Now the next question will become, how can we find the element? How can we always locate this element? Because you can see this document is super lengthy. How can we always find this element? Well, we'll talk about some more techniques later. But for now, let's do a quick round of exercise. So go to the browser and please find the HTML tags corresponding to Chick Studio, near everything, trending. You should see something that's fairly similar to what I have here. Should be something like related to a class, starting with a element, usually like div or span or whatever, div, span, button, or whatever, starting with those. And you should also see a related text related to the Chick Studio. So the point of this exercise is to make sure we know how to find the corresponding HTML text when we have a website. That's usually the first step you need to take when you're doing web scraping. That also goes for your assignment this week. You need to scrape like 10 different things from one page, right? I mean, it's only 10 different things, so you can always copy paste for that one, but it's not what we want you to do. We want you to find a way to systematically extract the text we want. Just like, okay, we want to systematically extract something like this. Everyone cool with this idea of web scraping? Let me know if you have any trouble locating this text when we're working with inspecting element. Everyone found the text corresponding to Chick Studio, the title? Feel free to paste your final answer into the chat. It could be a little bit lengthy, but I think it's fine. Okay, I'll wait for a couple more seconds. Shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, I'm already telling you the answer. Here, this is the HTML text corresponding to that. You can see for different type of text, you can see like it's styled by different element. And another thing I want you to notice is that here, when you're copy pasting, you mean when you're copy pasting, you can when you hit like right click and copy this HTML text, you can see a bunch of different options to copy. You can copy element, you can copy outer, copy selector, copy JS path, copy styles, and each of them corresponds to different ways this document is situated. So if you copy XPath, it's basically, okay, let me just copy XPath, and then you can see this is the XPath for this specific element. And if you copy something different, let's see, copy. By the way, if you added the HTML file here, your web page might be crashed. So yeah, because it's no longer rendered properly. So your HTML page might crash. Oh, let's copy the XPath twice. If you copy like selector, maybe you have read this is the selector. And why does this, you can see, okay, it's something similar to the XPath, but slightly different. You can also copy the styles. I think the style will give you a really, really different stuff. Here is the complete CSS style for this stuff. Super lengthy, not a good best thing you want to ever work with. But here you can see what we're doing. All of these, the package we're using today, Selenium and WebDriver, offer you different ways to locate or pattern match the same element everywhere. So if you feed, technically speaking, well, hypothetically, when you paste this type of XPath or this type of style into your selector with Selenium, Selenium should be able to identify, okay, all of the elements within the HTML page that has the exact same component, that has the exact same XPath or selector. Theoretically, there's something that's not working for various reasons. For example, the XPath may not be unique. For example, the selector may be of different version because of different JavaScript or like TypeScript version we're using, or like as we said, Airbnb might do some like methods to prevent web scraping. You might wonder, why do they want to prevent web scraping? Like, I'm just scraping the price. Why is that a big deal? Well, the problem is, I can send a request to Airbnb with Python. Like, I can send 1 million requests per second. What would happen when I send 1 million requests per second to Airbnb? The website will crash. If 1 million doesn't work, I'll try 1 billion. I could spin up like 1 billion requests per second easily if I have enough computers, right? So what's the problem? Well, a regular human users can no longer find the right price. So usually most of the websites will prevent you from running the same request over and over again. But anyway, let's see how things go. So here is a demo that we are scraping the request. Here you can see it's response. I'm printing out the response code. The response code 200 means, okay, this response is successful. If you see the response code starting with 400, that means your response is failed. That usually because you don't have the right permission to access the web, this page, or you are accessing an invalid URL. Okay, here we're printing the first 500 text of the HTML content. As we can see, this one is very lengthy. Let's see how long this one is. Length of the HTML content. Okay, this one is 651 and 267. Well, 651,267 character. So it is a lengthy document. You probably don't want to just go through that and Control F all the way. So we will have a smarter way to do Control F. The first way to do so is by our old friend, regex. Here we have the regex pattern. If you forget about it, it's totally fine. You can have AI write it for you. It's probably faster than writing the regex yourself. Here we can have, okay, I have this HTML content and I want to parse like something, something, something that would find a pattern of Chick Studio near everything's trendy. And here we go. This is, okay, I'm using an older version of the API, but that's fine. It's a warning, it's not an error. So here I have identified two different tags for that. I'm basically finding the tags that contains like characters and a dash. So this is what I'm expecting. So this is basic of HTML and some reminder of how regex could be useful somehow. And I would say Beautiful Soup is the package to basically work with HTML components in Python. It's the go-to options here. Here, let's see another example. As we said, we want to identify the price. So how can we do that? Well, first, let's start thinking about what WebDriver is doing. So what WebDriver is doing is basically simulate, instead of sending a request to the URL and get a response, what WebDriver is doing is it's kind of faking a Google Chrome session. What WebDriver is doing is basically you're controlling a Google Chrome, like imagine you're starting a new Chrome window, and then ask the driver to go to, okay, here I'm starting up a new Google Chrome and I'm not disabling GPU. No sandbox means that I am not hitting an open, like this will not pop open. But if the argument is with sandbox or something like that, I can't remember the exact statement, exact wording, you will get a pop-up Google Chrome like Windows. If you want, you could. Caution, that is going to consume your GPU on your local computer. I'm not using it because I'm using Google Colab, and it's not a good idea to use. You'll get a bug if you start a sandbox here. But anyway, this driver is just telling my WebDriver API to start a Chrome session. And then this driver that get is telling my driver to go to this URL here. Next, finally, we're trying to tell our driver to select the element. So here, this function will locate by XPath. I'm offering the XPath with a specific pattern, contains text and this thing. So by XPath, I'm going to get all the XPath that contains div, a $, and a text. Okay, and this part is just parsing the final text for the answers. Here is what we get when we execute. Okay, so successfully we got the price, all the $, and text. Not only the price, but also for everything with a $, and a price will be included in the final result. And that's roughly what we want. Not the best thing we could do, but roughly what we want. Because, well, what comes next? Well, I can just write another regex to just have $ in price and find the lowest price. And then I can call it a day for this listing, right? And then if I repeat this process for all of the dates and all of the listings I can find the data sets, right? But remember, how many data do we have? How many listings do we have from the previous data set? I think it was almost something like a million or something, right? So if you repeat this process for maybe 10 million times, you will get a data set we were using. Hold on, but there's the thing. I think I tried running this process for like 10 times, and I'm already getting banned from Airbnb because, yeah, I'm sending a request consistently from the same IP address, and they're banning me for suspicious activity. So, and there's a reason why we set this driver for 5 seconds. Driver wait for 5 seconds. Okay, so here's one example of that. And also be cautious because this mechanism may not always work. So far, we've been using the XPath to locate this element, right? But what if we are no longer there, Airbnb no longer use $? Maybe it's changed to euro. Maybe I changed the language, it's now Japanese yen. How can I scrape that? Well, you need to write something else. And basically, whenever the front end of the page, which means that any of the styling elements of the page is different, your web scraping mechanism has a chance to fail. Most of the time, your web scraping mechanism is not consistent. I mean, there are a lot of different people trying to scrape the websites for Airbnb, for a lot of different hotel sites. And it will be a nightmare when these websites have a major update because that means you need to write your own like pipeline again. So be cautious when you're doing web scraping. That's why we have a section about, okay, web scraping is fragile somewhere. Okay. And here, just to reiterate again, Airbnb is not the easiest site to scrape. They actually prevent web scraping because you can just use the same mechanism to paralyze Airbnb's website. There are some other websites that gives you like easier access to their documents. And yeah. And also, I want to point out, for the sake of this course, we're just introducing how you can scrape the elements from here. But with Selenium and WebDriver, you can also simulate like mouse clicks somehow. So if you want to write your own version of like ticket buying robots, those robots that buys Taylor Swift tickets or your favorite sports team's tickets instantly, Selenium and WebDriver is the go-to option. You can replicate it clicking and like everything and buy these tickets in like 1 millisecond faster than any human can do if you're not banned by the website. Just so you know. I think there's actually open GitHub pages on those things. Okay. Another thing we can scrape easily is from the US SEC website. They actually provide pretty like easy access to web users. So here I have the, let's see, SEC report for Google open. Here you can see it's for Google. It's one of their financial reports. I don't care about the content, but just want to make a quick comparison here. Their style is actually a lot easier than Airbnb's. You don't see those elusive text. Each of them has the style and the class for each of them is consistent across the table because they're not trying to block you from like scraping this document. And actually, you can easily scrape this entire document by a few lines. You can just hit response, or you can use Selenium or WebDriver, whichever way you like. And then you can use pandas actually have a built-in like read HTML function. And this function will just read all of the tables, something like this one, into a pandas data frame. And as you can, I think there should be a table somewhere. If you collapse it, you can see, okay, it's a table, so pandas will scrape this thing and try to fit that into a table format. Most of the time, it's not perfect. Here's the result of, okay, for HAC, the only thing you need to be careful of is you need to specify a user agent, basically providing a fake email. As long as you have a fake, well, yeah, this one is a fake email and it works. And you'll be able to scrape the table from here. But as you can see, this table is kind of messy, not exactly what we want. So this is when you might need to write your custom pandas code to transform this into the exact format you want, or write your own regex or whatever methods you could to actually get the data you want. So web scraping, well, scraping the API and make sure you can download the data is one thing, but make sure you can clean the data from what you scrape into actually meaningful data is another. Most of the time, the second task is a lot more time consuming than the first one. Because a lot of time you will just get a lot of like, hold on, my code is working, and you open it up and you say, it's not exactly what I want. It's like a lot of NaN, a lot of null value, a lot of the columns not aligned, a lot of the mismatching, and so on and so forth. You just need to manually correct them or write another Python code to correct them. It's time consuming. And you can probably tell why is there so many NaN from the data from many of the data sets we've seen so far. Okay. And yeah, I think that's most of the contents I want to introduce for today. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And that's the content I have for today. Okay.